If you hear mysterious noises and sounds, if you hear your name called when there's no one around, keep going, dear listener. This story is for you. I hope it will accomplish what I wrote it to do. In these words, you will find all the tools you'll need, so that when you're faced with unimaginable things, you won't react with fear, as most people do. You'll be equipped, calm, and able to see the truth. My best, Hedy. This is What We Keep Hidden. By Nicole. Chapter 15. Dowsing rods. Ouch. The wires of my DIY dowsing rods were jabbing at my hip through my raincoat. A special sensory hell. The night before, I managed to get my hands on the remainder of the copper wires left over from our electrical system. Taking it back to my desk, I used my abundance of tools to help shape and bend the wire into 2 capital L's, with the short side acting as a handle. These handles were what was now jabbing into my skin. Almost there, I said, as I saw Lucy's grin widen on her face. I followed her gaze and saw Betty's roofline come into view above the tops of the oak trees. Finally, I could remove the dowsing rods from my pocket and start my experiment. First things first, I said, as I grabbed my notebook and set it on the ground. Anything above the baseline readings I took at the house will show that something's up over here. Maybe then I can take the data to Betty and show her there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just an explainable scientific anomaly the house is sitting on. I took the 2 dowsing rods in one hand and made a note of my location for this first round of the experiment. Lucy, recognizing these telltale signals, chose a spot to nest in the cool dirt below an oak tree off to the side. I muttered to myself as I dropped the pencil on the notebook and stood up. Let's begin. I took a dowsing rod in each hand, holding them lightly enough as to not influence their movement, yet firm enough so that they wouldn't fall. After a few steps forward, I noticed slight variations happening, more than likely accounted for by the swaying motion of my footsteps, though. There were 2 directions to explore: inward through the grove or towards Betty's house. I took a step closer to the oaks, observing little to no movement in the rods, so I retraced my steps and headed back towards Betty's house. Jump, quiver, sway. The dowsing rods waved and danced with each other. My eyes widened as I watched their movements in my hands, desperately trying not to influence them in any way. Even Lucy's head perked up to watch what was happening. They took on a life of their own the closer I got to Betty's house. I didn't want to pause the experiment. I needed to see where this was going, but I also needed to make notes of the phenomena happening right before my eyes. Lucy, I called over my shoulder. Can you grab my notebook? Well, she complied. Silly dog. Never a bow wow like you hear in the movies or on TV. Her delicate footsteps, or paw steps, now behind me, I made my way to the opening in the bushes before Betty's house. I engaged in my best army crawl I could manage, but even though I succeeded in keeping the rods upright, I severely knocked them into each other. Well, that data's unusable now, I complained. I put them both in one hand and finished crawling through the remaining branches. Obviously, I was taking too long, since an impatient Lucy started to nudge me with her nose from behind. All right, I told her as I reached the other side. Lucy exited the grove excitedly, notebook in mouth. I'll take that. Thanks, I said, giving her a thank you head scratch and pulling the notebook out of her mouth. Oh, yuck. My notebook was full of my observations, and now Lucy's drool. After wiping off the slobber, I put it into one of her pockets to dry. Guess I'll have to work off of memory for now. I got myself situated and returned to my experiment, focusing so as to not miss any details. If I thought the rods were jumpy out in the oak grove, now they were downright lively. Their movements were so swift and exaggerated that I didn't care about remembering precise actions, but settled for an overall average of movements. We continued to walk towards the house, studying the rod's increasing rate of activity. Just a few feet from the porch, it was as if someone had pulled them up out of my hands into the air, where they hovered for a few seconds before quickly falling to the ground. Stunned, I stood there for a few moments, racking my brain to remember if I had tripped or subconsciously threw them into the air without realizing it. No, I knew I was holding them as delicately as when I began the experiment. I blinked quite a bit trying to regain my composure when I heard the front door open. Oh, I thought I heard you too, Betty said as she walked towards us. Hey, Betty. Yeah, just us, I said as I bent down to pick up the rods on the ground. What you got there, kid? She asked as she leaned on the porch railing above me. I stood up, holding the dowsing rods in my hands like I was showing them to her. In reality, I had paused for a minute, not prepared to disclose the reasoning behind making them. Oh, I remember those. Played with them as a kid myself. Aren't those a hoot? Yeah, totally, I managed. I made them last night and thought I'd test them around the neighborhood. Oh, my little scientist. Well, get over here and we'll test them in the garden too. How about that? Great, I agreed enthusiastically. Betty began walking swiftly towards the garden while pulling her apron straps around her waist to tie them. I call dibs, she yelled back over her shoulder. I get first try. Laughing, I followed behind her. Guess I don't need to come up with an excuse just yet, and I can still keep my experiment under wraps. At least until I have some more concrete evidence to give her. Hey there, it's Hedy. Do you want to join our H&B secret society? I might even be able to convince Betty to share her famous butterfly PT recipe with you. We'll see about that. For now, head on over to laurennicole.art/stories to see how you can get your official member badge. See you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What We Keep Hidden. Tune in next time to see what happens. What We Keep Hidden is written, narrated, and produced by Lauren Nicole. This has been a Lauren Nicole creation.